The last thing I remember clearly is the smell of rain on hot asphalt, a scent I've always associated with summer afternoons and relief. Then, nothing. Just a murky gray fog until I woke up in a hospital bed with a nurse asking me my name. When I finally made it back to my own front door, key still on the ridiculous little cat-shaped ring my sister gave me, a strange woman answered. She had a face I felt I should know, but it was buried deep in the fog. "Can I help you?" she asked, a little too sweetly. Then her husband, a tall man with my husband's eyes, stepped up behind her. "Mom, you need to go," he said, his voice hard. "We told you at the hospital, this isn't your house anymore. You have a week." If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Now, let me tell you what really happened. They called me Carol at the hospital. Apparently that's my name. Carol Peterson, 63 years old. I'd had a fall, they said. A nasty slip on some wet pavement after a sudden downpour. It resulted in what the doctors called retrograde amnesia, a fancy way of saying my past was a blank slate. They found my driver's license in my purse, which is how they got my name and address, and apparently how they contacted my next of kin. That next of kin was the man standing in my doorway, Mark, and his wife Tiffany. They told me he was my son, my only son. Standing there on my own porch, looking at my own climbing roses trellised around the door, I felt nothing. No spark of recognition, no maternal pull. Just a cold, hard knot of confusion in my stomach. The man had my late husband's eyes, I'll give him that. I knew about my husband, David, because they'd told me. Died of a heart attack 5 years ago. I didn't remember him either, but the grief felt like a phantom limb, an ache for something I couldn't see. "What do you mean it's not my house?" I asked, my voice sounding shaky even to my own ears. The key felt heavy in my hand. It was a Schlage key. I could see the brand name. It matched the lock on the door. It was my key. Tiffany, a woman who looked to be in her late 30s with hair the color of straw and nails that were long and aggressively pink, stepped forward. She put a hand on Mark's arm, a gesture that was probably meant to look supportive but came off as possessive. "Carol," she said, her voice dripping with pity, "we went over this. You signed the house over to us months ago. Don't you remember? For your own good, so we could manage things for you. The fall must have really muddled you up." Signed the house over? I looked down at my hands. They were capable hands, with short, clean nails and a few liver spots I didn't recognize. Were these the hands of a woman who would sign away her own home? A home David and I had, according to the pictures on the mantle I could see over their shoulders, built a life in? There was a photo of a smiling couple on a boat. A younger me with a silly sun hat, and a man with kind eyes. David, I presumed. Then there was a family portrait. The couple from the boat and a young boy with a gap-tooth grin. Mark. My son! The knot in my stomach tightened. He was my son, and he was kicking me out of my house. I don't remember signing anything, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mark's face, which had been set in a look of grim determination, softened just a little bit, not with sympathy, but with something that looked a lot like impatience. "Look, Mom, we knew this would be hard. That's why we got you that nice room at the Golden Meadows facility. It's all set up. Your things are already there. The important ones, anyway." Golden Meadows. It sounded like a name for a dairy farm, not a place to live. My important things. Who decided what was important to a woman whose memories they held hostage? "I want to see the papers," I demanded, a little bit of steel entering my voice. If I didn't know who I was, I could at least pretend to be someone who wouldn't be pushed around. "The papers I supposedly signed." Tiffany's smile thinned. "Now is not the time to get agitated, Carol. Your doctor said stress is bad for your recovery."
"I think being told I'm homeless is a little more stressful than looking at a piece of paper," I countered. I took a step forward, trying to peer around them into the familiar yet unfamiliar house. My house. I am not going to any golden meadows until I see proof that this house no longer belongs to me. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with, or rather who I was discovering myself to be. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Mark sighed, a long, theatrical sound of a man burdened. "Fine," he snapped. "Wait here." He and Tiffany exchanged a look, and she stayed in the doorway, blocking my path like a designer-clad gargoyle. He returned a few minutes later with a sheaf of papers and shoved them into my hands. The top page was a quitclaim deed. My name was signed at the bottom, a loopy, elegant script that looked like it could be mine. It was dated 6 months ago. The property at 42 Azalea Lane was transferred from Carol Peterson to Mark and Tiffany Peterson for the grand sum of $1. My eyes scanned the document. Notarized, witnesses. It all looked so official, so final. But something felt wrong, terribly wrong. The signature, while it looked like the one on my driver's license, seemed, I don't know, too perfect? Too practiced? It was the signature of a woman signing a birthday card, not signing away her entire life. A little flicker, a tiny spark of something, ignited in the back of my foggy mind. It wasn't a memory, more like an instinct, a gut feeling, the feeling that I was being had. "This can't be right," I said, shaking my head. "The papers don't lie, Mom," Mark said flatly. "It's done. You have a week. We'll be changing the locks then. It's for the best. You can't manage this big place on your own anymore." They closed the door in my face. The click of the deadbolt echoed what had just happened in my life. I was locked out. Standing on the porch of the house I apparently gave away, with a purse, a key that no longer worked, and a handful of papers that legally declared me a stranger, I had two choices. I could fold, go to the dairy farm for old people, and let the fog consume me, or I could fight. And as I stood there staring at the cheerful yellow paint and the climbing roses I suddenly had an urge to prune, I felt another flicker. It was the ghost of a personality, a whisper of the woman I used to be. She wasn't a woman who folded. My first stop was the library. If I couldn't trust my own memory, I would have to rely on public records. I needed a starting point, a thread to pull. My purse contained a wallet with my ID, a credit card, which Tiffany had so helpfully informed me they had canceled for my protection, $27 in cash, and a library card. Thank God for the library card. The librarian, a lovely woman named Sheila, with a kind face and a cardigan, helped me get set up on one of the public computers. My fingers fumbled over the keyboard at first, but then something clicked. Muscle memory. It turned out I knew how to type. Quite well, actually. Another piece of the puzzle of Carol Peterson fell into place. I wasn't just a pottering old lady who signed away her house. I was a woman who knew her way around a QWERT keyboard. I started with the basics. Property records for 42 Azalea Lane. The city's website was clunky, but I navigated it. I found the deed transfer, just as they'd shown me. It was filed legally. I looked up the notary public, a Miss Janice Weathers. A quick search showed she ran a small business out of a strip mall on the other side of town. I wrote down her name and address. Then I searched for my own name, Carol Peterson. And that's when I found the first real breadcrumb, an old article from the local newspaper's digital archives. The headline read, "Local Accountant Uncovers City Hall Embezzlement Scheme." The date was 10 years ago. The accountant was me, Carol Peterson. The article featured a picture of a younger me, maybe early 50s, with a confident smile and sharp eyes, standing next to a very proud-looking David. According to the article, I had volunteered to help the city with their books and uncovered a massive fraud ring that had been siphoning money for years. I had been tenacious, methodical, and followed a complex paper trail that professional auditors had missed. Reading the words, I felt a surge of something. Pride? Familiarity? The woman in that article, the one that stared down city crooks, did not seem like the type of person who would be tricked into signing away her house. It didn't add up. This was the moment I realized my memory loss wasn't just a weakness, it could also be a weapon. Mark and Tiffany thought I was a confused old woman, a blank slate they could write their own story on. They had no idea that I was a blank slate with the mind of a forensic accountant. They'd forgotten who I was, and in doing so, they'd given me the chance to figure it out for myself. And when I did, they were going to be in for a very big surprise. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was a cold, hard rage, the kind of rage that clarifies things. The woman in that newspaper article wouldn't have just walked away. She would have dug in her heels and started pulling on threads. And the first thread I needed to pull was Janice Weathers, the notary public.
But first, a practical matter. I had a week until they changed the locks, but I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of thinking I was crawling off to their Golden Meadows resort. And I couldn't very well sleep in my car because I didn't have one. They had probably taken that, too. My mind raced. If I lived here, I must have neighbors, a friendly face, someone who knew the woman I was. I walked back toward my house, my stolen house, and looked at the one next door. It was a charming blue bungalow with a porch swing and an explosion of perfectly tended petunias in the flower boxes. I saw a woman through the front window, watering an orchid. She looked to be about my age. Taking a deep breath, I walked up her pathway and rang the bell. The woman who opened the door was plump and had a cloud of curly white hair and the kind of bright, inquisitive eyes that miss nothing. She gasped when she saw me, her hand flying to her chest. "Peril! My goodness, what on earth are you doing here? Mark told me you were all settled in at that lovely new place, Golden Meadows. He said you were just thrilled with it." Bingo. The relief was so profound I nearly sagged against the doorframe. This woman knew me, and my own son was a liar. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry, my memory is, well, it's gone. I had a fall. The doctors say I have amnesia." Her face softened from surprise to deep concern. "Oh, you poor dear. Get in here right this minute." "A fall? Is that what happened? Tiffany just said you'd had a little episode and needed more professional care." She pulled me into a warm hug that smelled of cinnamon and coffee. "I'm Judy, Carol, Judy Thompson. We've been neighbors for 30 years. We solve the world's problems over that hedge right there every morning." She led me to a comfortable armchair in her living room, bustling around to make me a cup of tea. For the first time since waking up in that hospital, I felt a flicker of safety. Judy chattered on as the kettle whistled, filling in the blanks in a way no doctor's report could. We'd been widows together, supporting each other through grief. We're in the same book club. I apparently made a lemon meringue pie that was to die for. "So," she said, setting a steaming mug in front of me after I had explained the scene at my front door. "So let me get this straight. Mark and that witch Tiffany told you signed your house away?" "They had papers, Judy. A quitclaim deed. It had my signature." Judy snorted, a sound of pure disbelief. "Horse hockey. Carol Peterson, you are the most sharp-witted, financially savvy woman I have ever known. You used to do my taxes for me, for heaven's sakes. You told me yourself not 8 months ago that you would never, ever sign that house over to Mark. You said, and I quote, 'I love my son, but I'm not funding his midlife crisis.'" The part "I love my son, but I'm not funding his midlife crisis" was definitely a part that I said. "You were worried about them," Judy continued, leaning forward. "Mark lost his job last year, the consulting gig. Tiffany spends money like it's water. I saw the new Lexus she was driving last week.
You said they'd already asked you to co-sign a loan for some ridiculous cryptocurrency scheme, and you flat out refused. You said, and I quote, "I love my son, but I'm not funding his midlife crisis." Everything Judy said felt true. It aligned with the tenacious woman from the newspaper article. I wasn't a feeble old woman who needed managing. I was a protector of my assets, a sharp mind, and my son had taken advantage of my injury to steal my life from me. He hadn't just stolen my house, he had tried to erase the person I was, replacing her with a helpless woman who would meekly go to Golden Meadows. But the old Carol, the lemon meringue pie baking, tax auditing, fraud exposing Carol, was starting to wake up, and she was furious. "Judy," I said, my voice now firm, "I need your help. First, can I possibly stay with you for a few days? Second, I need a ride." The next morning, with $100 Judy had pressed into my hand for expenses, I had her drop me off a block away from the address I'd found for the notary, Janice Weathers. It was in one of those sad little strip malls with a failing laundromat and a psychic reader. Janice's Mobile Notary and Business Services. I pushed open the door. A bell chimed. The office was cramped and smelled of stale coffee. A woman with brassy blonde hair and a tense face looked up from her computer. It was her, Janice. I decided to play the role they'd cast me in, the confused, memory-addled old woman. "Excuse me," I said, putting a little wobble in my voice. "Are you Janice Weathers?" "I am. How can I help you?" she asked me, her tone brisk.
"Well, this is all so embarrassing," I began, clutching my purse. "I'm Carol Peterson. My son, Mark, says I came here a while ago to sign some papers about my house. I had a little fall, you see, and my memory is all jumbled up. I was hoping you might remember me, just to put my mind at ease." Janice Weathers froze, just for a second. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't recognition. It was fear. "Oh," she said, forcing a tight smile. "Mrs. Peterson? Of course. Yes, you came in with your son. It was a few months back." "Was I all right?" I asked, looking at her with wide, pleading eyes. "My son worries so much, and I can't for the life of me recall the meeting." "You were fine, perfectly lucid," she said, a little too quickly. "You and your son were talking about how it was such a relief to have things in order. It was all very straightforward." "Oh, good," I sighed. "You know, for these kinds of things, don't you have to keep a big book, a log of everyone who signs?" I was fishing, but it felt like the right question for a forensic accountant to ask. Her smile faltered. "Yes, we're legally required to keep a notary journal. Could I possibly just see the entry? I know it sounds silly, but seeing my signature in your book might jog something for me. This memory thing is just so frustrating." I leaned forward, channeling every sweet old lady I'd ever seen on television. Panic flashed in her eyes. "Oh, I'm afraid that's confidential. I can't just show that to anyone." "But I'm not just anyone, am I? I'm the person who signed it. It's my entry." She was cornered, and she knew it. Reluctantly, she pulled a thick, bound ledger from under her desk. She flipped through the pages, her long nails making clicking sounds. "Here we are," she said, turning the book toward me, but keeping her hand firmly on the page, obscuring most of it. I could see the line entry for Carol Peterson, 42 Azalea Lane, and I saw my signature. It looked right. But then I saw something else. On the line right above mine, for a different client, was the signature of one of the witnesses to my deed, Brenda K. Schmidt. And on the line right below mine, for another client, was the signature of the second witness, Gary Miller. My deed required 2 witnesses who were not family members. My eyes flicked from the witness signature Brenda K. Schmidt to the name Tiffany Peterson on the copy of the deed I was holding. The B in Brenda was identical to the T in Tiffany, the same exaggerated, showy loop. The way the S in Schmidt flowed was a mirror image of the P in Peterson. It was the same handwriting. And the Gary Miller signature? The strong, right-slanting G and M were an exact match for my signature, Mark Peterson, at the bottom of the deed. My son and his wife hadn't just had me sign a deed, they had forged the witnesses. It was a small detail, a sloppy, arrogant mistake, and it was going to be their undoing. I looked up at Janice, the sweet, confused old lady vanishing. My voice dropped, becoming the cold, clear voice of the woman who found stolen money in city ledgers. "That's a felony, you know," I said quietly. The color drained from Janice Weathers' face. Janice swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously around her little office. The sound of the street traffic outside seemed to fade into a distant hum. What are you talking about?" she stammered, though her terrified expression already told me she knew exactly what I was talking about. "Forgery," I stated, my voice calm and steady. "Falsifying witness signatures on a legal document, and a notary public, a trusted official, facilitating it. That's a very serious offense, Janice. We're talking about disbarment, heavy fines, and even jail time." I let that sink in for a moment, watching the horror bloom in her eyes. "My son and daughter-in-law, Mark and Tiffany Peterson, coerced you into notarizing a quitclaim deed where the required non-family witnesses were in fact themselves. They signed those names right there in your book, didn't they? And you stamped it knowing full well." She began to hyperventilate a little bit, fanning herself with her hand. "No, I didn't. I thought they told me..." She trailed off, unable to form a convincing lie. "They told you what, Janice? That I was too far gone to remember? That it was just a formality? That no one would ever know?" I pressed. "Well, someone does know now, and I'm here, with no memory, but a very clear understanding of legal fraud."
I picked up the copy of the deed they had given me, comparing it again to the entries in her notary journal. "Look at this," I continued, tracing the elaborate T in Tiffany's real name and comparing it to the B in the forged witness name, Brenda K. Schmidt. That distinctive loop, the flourish on the K, it's unmistakable. And your log here perfectly preserves the evidence of their amateur hour deception. You documented their fraudulent signatures for me." I tapped the journal with a knowing finger. Who would have thought a forensic accountant with amnesia would be so useful? Her eyes widened to saucers at the mention of forensic accountant. Clearly, Mark and Tiffany had omitted that detail from their story about helpless old mom. The knowledge that she wasn't just dealing with a confused senior, but with someone who understood the finer points of financial chicanery completely unnerved her. I can lose everything," Janice whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "My business, my license, my whole life." "You already have," I replied coolly. "You made a choice when you put that stamp on those papers, a choice that implicates you directly in a felony. But," I paused, letting the silence hang heavy, "you have another choice to make right now." She looked up, hope flickering faintly through her fear. What do you mean?" "I'm not here to destroy you, Janice, not if I don't have to be. I'm here to reclaim what was stolen from me and to hold those truly responsible accountable." I fixed her with my gaze. "You're going to help me. You're going to provide me with a notarized affidavit stating the truth about how that deed was witnessed.
that Mark and Tiffany Peterson were the individuals who signed as Brenda K. Schmidt and Gary Miller in your presence, and you're going to testify to that if needed. Janice stared at me, processing. And if I do, then my grievance is with my son and daughter-in-law, not with you. Your part in this will be regrettable, but not criminal. We can call it a lapse in judgment that you're now correcting, but if you refuse, I said, my voice hardening, I will ensure that every single legal avenue is pursued, and your name will be at the very top of the criminal complaint right after felony forgery. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. The decision was clear in her eyes. The choice between saving herself and protecting her clients, who had clearly thrown her under the bus, wasn't a hard one for her to make. I'll do it, she said, her voice shaky but resolute. What do you need me to write? I spent the next hour in Janice's office, meticulously drafting the affidavit. It had to be precise, clear, and legally airtight. The old forensic accountant Carol was truly awake now, and she was in her element. I made sure Janice understood the implications of every sentence, emphasizing the absolute truth of her sworn statement. When it was done, Janice signed it, her hands trembling, and stamped it with her official notary seal. A legitimate document this time. Armed with Janice's signed affidavit, my next call was to Judy. I need another favor, friend, I said, my voice crackling with barely suppressed triumph. I need you to help me find a good real estate lawyer, and fast. Judy didn't ask questions, bless her heart. She simply said, my cousin's a fantastic litigator, family law and property. I'll call her right now. By that afternoon, I was sitting in a lawyer's office with a stern but compassionate woman named Sarah Albright. She had a no-nonsense air and an incredibly efficient assistant who immediately took copies of Janice's affidavit and the fraudulent deed. Miss Peterson, Sarah said, tapping her pen on her desk, this is textbook fraud. Given the evidence from the notary public, your amnesia actually works in your favor here. It removes any plausible deniability that you knowingly participated in the transfer. She looked at me intently. This document essentially nullifies the quitclaim deed. We can file an immediate motion to set aside the fraudulent transfer and an injunction to prevent your son and daughter-in-law from selling or encumbering the property further. We'll also file a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. The criminal complaint. My son. The full weight of what I was doing settled over me. It wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about righting a deep, ugly wrong committed by my own flesh and blood. It stung, yes, but it didn't deter me. He made his bed.
Will this stop them from changing the locks on me? I asked. My primary goal was getting back into my home. Absolutely, Sarah confirmed. The moment the injunction is filed, the deed will be legally disputed. They cannot proceed with any action on the house until the court decides. In fact, under these circumstances, we can petition the court for a temporary restraining order to prevent them from interfering with your access. The relief washed over me. No golden meadows for Carol Peterson. Not yet, anyway. And how quickly can this all happen? We'll file first thing tomorrow morning, Sarah replied, a glint in her eye. Fraud cases with clear evidence like this tend to move swiftly, especially when they involve elderly abuse, which is how the DA will likely categorize this. This is more than just a property dispute. It's an egregious act against a vulnerable individual. Vulnerable, perhaps, but not helpless. I spent that evening with Judy, poring over old photo albums she kept of me and David and Mark growing up, page after page of a life I didn't remember, but that felt increasingly familiar. I saw my confident smile in those pictures, my arms around David, then Mark as a child. He was such a sweet boy once. What had happened? The sadness was profound, a raw, aching grief for a relationship that had been poisoned, and for the son I no longer recognized. But intertwined with the sadness was a growing sense of empowerment. I might have lost my past, but I was building a fierce, strong present. The next morning, as promised, Sarah's office filed the motion, the injunction, and the criminal complaint.
A process server was immediately dispatched to Mark and Tiffany's workplace. Judy, bless her heart, even drove me back to 42 Azalea Lane so I could be there when it happened. We parked down the street, waiting. And then I saw them. Mark's SUV, pulling up to my driveway. He got out, and Tiffany, her usual brightly dressed self, followed, carrying a small box. They looked like they were bringing tools. They were planning to change the locks, just as they said they would. On that 7th day. Suddenly, a nondescript sedan pulled up behind them. A man in a dark suit emerged, carrying a slim briefcase, the process server. He approached Mark and Tiffany, who both looked annoyed by the interruption. He spoke to them, then handed each of them a thick stack of papers. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see Tiffany's face drain of color as she scanned the documents. Mark's jaw clenched, and he let out a choked sound, a kind of strangled gasp. His eyes, the ones that looked like David's, narrowed, full of a terrifying mixture of shock and betrayal. He started yelling, his voice carrying faintly down the street. It was directed at the process server, then at Tiffany, then back at the papers. He gestured wildly towards the house. The process server remained calm, explaining something to them, and then he pointed down the street, directly at Judy's car, where I was sitting. My son, my greedy, conniving son, looked straight at me. Our eyes met, across the expanse of the street, across the years of my forgotten memories, and his undeniable betrayal. The confusion in his eyes was quickly replaced by utter, unadulterated fury. But beneath that fury, I saw something else. Fear. The kind of fear that only comes when you realize your carefully constructed lie has spectacularly imploded and the person you thought was helpless has somehow become your worst nightmare. It was time to go home. I got out of the car. Judy gave my hand a supportive squeeze as I opened the door. "You've got this, Carol," she whispered. I didn't look back. I walked, slowly and deliberately, up the street to my house. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my own soul. The fog in my head was still there, but a path was clearing right through the middle of it, a path that led straight up my front walk. Mark was still ranting, his face a blotchy, furious red. Tiffany was standing frozen, the legal papers clutched in her perfectly manicured hand, her mask of sweet condescension shattered. All that was left was a raw, ugly panic. As I approached, Mark's tirade faltered. He turned his full attention to me, his chest heaving. "You," he spat with voice filled with venom. "How could you? After everything we've done for you, we were trying to help you." "Help me?" I stopped about 10 feet from them, letting the question end in the air. "Was it helping me when you forged witness signatures on a legal document? Was it helping me when you left me on my own porch and told me I was homeless? Was it helping me when you lied to my friends and tried to shove me into a facility before I could ask a single question?" Tiffany flinched at the word forged. Her eyes darted toward her husband, as if looking for a script, but he had nothing. He was just a geyser of rage. "You don't understand," he yelled. "This house is too much for you. The finances, the upkeep. We were taking that burden off your shoulders." "The burden," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Let's talk about burdens, Mark. Let's talk about the burden of your debt, the burden of your wife's Lexus, the burden of a lifestyle you can't afford. That's the burden you were trying to unload, wasn't it? And you decided to unload it onto my life's work, onto the home your father and I built." Just then, my lawyer, Sarah Albright, pulled up behind Judy's car. She got out and walked towards us, a figure of calm, professional authority. Her arrival completely deflated whatever fight Mark had left. He looked like a balloon that had been pricked.
"Mr. and Mrs. Peterson," Sarah said, her tone crisp and businesslike. "My name is Sarah Albright. I am representing your mother, Carol Peterson. I trust you have received the notice of injunction and the pending civil and criminal complaints. My advice to you both is to say nothing further and hire an attorney immediately." She then turned to me. "Carol, the judge signed the temporary restraining order. They are not to come within 50 feet of you or this property." Tiffany let out a little sob. Mark just stared, his mouth agape. He looked from Sarah to me, and the reality of the situation finally seemed to land. The jig was up. They hadn't just been caught, they'd been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and legally checkmated. And it was all orchestrated by the confused old woman they had so callously dismissed. And the truth was about to get so much worse for them. The full, sordid story finally came out over the next few weeks, pieced together by Sarah's meticulous work. She'd pulled every financial record she could get her hands on. It turned out my fall and subsequent amnesia weren't the start of their plan. It was just a convenient and sudden opportunity. They had been in deep financial trouble for months. Mark hadn't just lost a job. He'd been fired for cause and had a non-compete that made it impossible for him to work in his field. They were leveraged to the hilt, living on credit and fumes. They'd been pressuring me for months to give them money or let them take out a second mortgage on the house to fund some can't-miss investment. According to my detailed financial ledgers Sarah found in a box in my closet, it turned out old Carol was an impeccable record keeper, had repeatedly refused. Then came my accident. It was the perfect storm for them. I was incapacitated, my memory wiped clean. The first thing they did, the very day I was admitted to the hospital, was get that fraudulent quitclaim deed notarized. But this is the part that will really turn your stomach. This is the detail they never thought would see the light of day. The day after the deed was filed and the house was officially in their names, they walked into a private lending company and took out a high-interest $150,000 loan against the equity in my home. They had the cash in their account within 72 hours. That new Lexus? It was just the down payment. The rest had been wired to some offshore account, likely for that crypto scheme Judy mentioned. They were planning to bleed my house dry, let it fall into foreclosure, and leave me warehoused in Golden Meadows while they fled with the money. My week to get out was their timeline to finalize the transfer of the funds and disappear. My unexpected lucidity and my one remaining library card had ruined everything for them. The legal proceedings were brutal for them. Once the DA's office got a hold of Janice Weathers' affidavit and the evidence of the immediate loan, they filed charges for felony forgery, grand theft, and elder abuse. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence, Mark and Tiffany turned on each other, as people like that always do. Tiffany, through her lawyer, claimed she was manipulated by a desperate husband. Mark claimed Tiffany was the mastermind, obsessed with maintaining a lifestyle they couldn't afford. It was ugly and pathetic. In the end, the judge voided the quitclaim deed, restoring ownership of my home to me free and clear. The $150,000 loan, having been taken out by them against an asset they acquired through fraud, became their personal, unsecured debt. The private lending company went after them with a vengeance.
Tiffany filed for divorce and left town. I heard from Judy she moved back in with her parents somewhere in Ohio. Mark took a plea deal. He avoided a long prison sentence, but ended up with 3 years of probation, a felony record that will follow him for life, and a court-ordered restitution plan that he will likely be paying for the next 30 years. The locks on my house were never changed. I walked through the door that very afternoon, my real key fitting perfectly into the lock. The house was exactly as I had left it, filled with the ghosts of a life I was slowly starting to piece back together. The smell of my favorite lemon-scented furniture polish, the feel of the worn spot on my armchair. Every day, a little more of the fog lifted. A memory would surface, the time David and I painted the living room and got more paint on ourselves than the walls. The specific way Mark would laugh as a little boy, a high-pitched giggle that made my heart ache. Some memories are still gone, and maybe they always will be, but I know who I am now. I am Carol Peterson. I'm a woman who loves her garden, who makes a tie-to-four lemon meringue pie, and who can read a balance sheet like a cheap novel. I'm a woman who was underestimated, betrayed, and nearly erased. But my son and his wife forgot one crucial thing. They forgot that even if you take away a woman's memories, you can't take away her character. Mine was forged in 63 years of life, love, and loss. And that's something that can never be stolen. I'm back in my home, my finances are secure, and I have my wonderful friend Judy right next door. I won, not through vengeance, but through the simple, powerful act of remembering who I truly was, deep down where it counts. It's been a heck of a journey, and I'm so grateful you all came along with me. Now, I have to ask, what would you do in my place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.